Really pleased to have with me today Darren, or Darain, depends on how you pronounce the name, who is the co-founder of People Like Us.
We were defining what social media was to the media. So Facebook came and basically quietly started pulling people across. It had a far cleaner, neater interface. People wanted it to use it as a utility. One of the things that kind of kept coming up is ethnicity pay gap. Like it's a big thing. Like it's a known, depending on which stat you look at, it's anywhere between like 9 and 15% disparity between people just because of the color of their skin are being paid less. We've had this discussion about gender. It's unacceptable for gender, and it's unacceptable for people from ethnic backgrounds to be paid less.
I started these conversations to discuss leadership, mentorship, growth, and so much more from voices you may not have heard from before. I hope the conversations inspire you, motivate you, and give you something to think about. This is Leadership in Colour from myself, Shez Iqbal, supported and powered by me. Welcome to Leadership in Colour. Really pleased to have with me today Darren, or Darain, depends on how you pronounce the name, who is the co-founder of People Like Us. We met each other through LinkedIn, which of course speaks to the power of LinkedIn, but there was a post in particular referencing your shirt, and I'm really pleased that you put on a beautiful shirt for the conversation today. Thank you so much and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me. Yeah, that was that LinkedIn post actually performed far better. It was a throwaway post just about working with my brother, and in it was his comment that triggered quite a big discussion around it, and I think it kind of tapped into a bit of sibling naughtiness, which kind of I think kind of elicited lots of reaction. And I got a lot of contacts and a lot of great communications with people like yourself. So yeah, I was wearing a somewhat garish shirt then, and I wouldn't describe this one as garish. This is kind of culturally appropriate for where I am. So I live in Fiji. So this is what is described as a Bulla shirt, and I quite like it.
I think it's a great shirt. I think it's a fantastic shirt. I don't know what your brother was talking about. I thought the other shirt was really nice too, to be honest with you. So I'll have to get him on later and quiz him on his fashion sense as well. I just like wearing black t-shirts, to be honest. So I don't feel like I'm in a position to knock anybody else's attire. But
so more Steve Jobs style, and like just keep it simple, keep it the same.
I think it's more that it's just it's more flattering if you're a larger bloke, right? Like
fabulous, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So walk me through People Like Us, because you do that with your brother, right?
I do. So we co-founded People Like Us 6 years ago. So I should say that my background is in PR and marketing, and I've worked largely for consumer tech, for the last sort of 20 years or so, in various guises. So would it be useful to kind of just walk through what led to People? The first job I ever had was as a waiter, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I love food, I love people, I like being busy. I'm quite organized. I like the kind of the buzz that you get from having lots of plate spinning, sometimes quite literally at the same time. Like there is something quite that makes me feel alive about that. And I've worked at quite busy restaurants, and I really, really enjoyed that. And I was doing that from age 16 to like 19, 20, like sort of kind of through uni. And then while I was at uni, I, as all students, I just was like, I need a bit more cash, and I need something to kind of to bolster my student loan. And so there was an LGBT venue called Queen's Court in Leeds that was closing down for this massive refurbishment, and the gay community went to this venue in their droves, and it's a fabulous night out. They had a brilliant Monday night. It was called Quids In, so you pay £1 entry, and all the drinks were £1. Again, sort of
sounds like a standard for like university night out, right? Like
it was excellent, and like great tunes, or I thought they were great tunes. It was a terrific night, and anyway, it was closing for this massive sort of £1 million refurb. So you had a lot of people who were like, what are we going to do on a Monday night? And then me and a couple of mates were like, we should plug that gap. We should do something. And so, and I'll say that this is still probably one of the best ideas I think I've ever had. We launched a club night for the gay community in Leeds. And the twist was that it was an astrological themed night. And so it was called, wait for it, it was called Gaze, Gaze. And the idea was when you came in, you got your star sign stuck on you. So you come in, I'm a Libra. What star sign are you, Shez?
Leo.
Leo. Okay, so you get a Leo stuck on you. I'm there as a Libra. And then what we created, because this was like back in 2000, a compatibility grid. And it got updated every week depending on the stars and the moons. And the idea was wherever each of these things matched, it was either like a traffic light system. It's like, go for it, give it a go, or don't even go there. Like you're completely incompatible. And it was as simple as that. And so everyone has a star sign. Everyone could get involved. There was something to talk about. If you wanted to chat someone up, it was the easiest way to kind of like approach someone. And so I loved the concept, right? I was just like, this is really cool. We're onto something. But I didn't have any budget for marketing or I didn't, to be honest, really know what marketing was. But I did know that, these are the papers that the community read. These are the radio stations that they listen to. These are the people that I should probably try to influence. So I was picking up the phone and speaking to journalists for the first time, just sort of like, and putting together really crappy press releases. I didn't even know they were press releases. They were like, I don't know what they were, but they were just notes, and just kind of whizzing them out to people and then kind of following them up with phone calls. Turns out I had inadvertently kicked off my PR career in so doing, and I ended up it got a huge amount of coverage, like huge amounts of coverage. It was in the big issue up north. It was in obviously all the LGBT publications, all the magazines that sadly kind of disappeared now. They covered it heavily. mainstream media were also kind of picking up on it, and they thought it was kind of, anyway, the night was like an unbelievable success, and we had queues around the corner, and yeah, we were like, oh gosh, this isn't. I mean, when we charged £2 for entry because we were like, you've got nowhere else to go. You're going to pay that extra quid, and we got some decent drinks promos, and it was great. People loved it, and so anyway, so that's that was kind of what kind of got me into communications. And I was just like, I really enjoyed the buzz of not, I was good at building relationships. I always have been, and to be able to kind of use that and get rewarded with payment was like a bit of an anathema to me. And I was like, okay, there's something here. So anyway, that was that. It ran for a number of months. The other venue reopened, and we did shut it down because we were like, actually, we can't compete with that. It was a nice novelty thing for a bit, and it was around the time I moved to Australia. I did my gap year in Sydney. Well, actually, not in Sydney. I started in. Is it a gap year if you do it after uni? Anyway, I did a year in Australia, and I landed in Cairns, and I dropped my way down the coast. And again, funnily enough, as a backpacker, came to the same conclusion that I was didn't have enough cash, and I was like, "There's an idea that I've had. I wonder if I could regurgitate this in Australia." And Sydney itself also had a big thriving gay scene as well. So I was like, "Sod it, let's do this." And managed to get some great DJs, managed to get this kind of fairly obscure venue that was on Oxford Street on board. And again, I was like, I can pick up the French journalist, and ended up on the cover of a local magazine, which was quite something. And again, generated just this huge amount of excitement and interest. And the night again was a great success. So I was like, okay, I started, and the media scene I realised in Australia and Sydney was actually far, far smaller than in the UK. And actually to build those relationships wasn't quite as a bigger a task as it might be in the UK for someone starting off in their PR career. And then, stumbled into a job at a boutique little PR agency, loved it, did that for a bit. Then my visa was kind of up. So I had to go back to the UK, and then got another job for another boutique agency in Milton Keynes, which was less glamorous than Sydney, but the work was excellent. It was their major client was a company called first leisure corporation. They owned a series of nightclubs up and down the country. People of a certain age will know who they are. Equinox, The Works. There was a whole raft of them they had, but loads of them up and down the country. So from a PR perspective, it was a dream, because I was either doing PR for some of these fairly crappy sort of PAs that they had. So it might have been soap stars. So Dot Cotton from EastEnders was like DJing at one of the venues, and that was suddenly
Dot Cotton DJing. Come on.
Yeah, no, well, it kind of, I mean, like, yeah, no, it worked, and it got column inches, and she did that. But obviously, on the flip side of that, you also had, the darker side of what happens in clubs, and there were rapes, and there were like murders, and there were like just awful shit that was going down. And so, as a young PR person just starting their career, to have that sort of exposure to communications, both like high level, amusing consumer sun fodder, as well as like local news stuff, which was big at the time. But also then having to kind of manage essentially crisis communications for some of these organizations. Obviously I was lower down the pecking order in terms of like I wasn't drafting the releases, but just to have exposure to all of that at the time was really quite something. So that's kind of like the start of my PR career. I then decided that I didn't really want to be in the UK anymore, and kind of snapped back to Australia for love. So I ended up back in Oz, which was great. And I had probably one of the best decades of my life. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Anyway, it was a great run. I was there from like 22 to 31, 32, something like that. And it was terrific. And when I was there, I just happened to be, I was looking for a job. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time and met the right person. And she is an absolute inspirational leader to me. Her name's Rebecca Horn. She was sort of cherry-picked herself, actually, to kind of launch what was the fastest growing website in the world at the time. So I don't know how many of your listeners will be familiar with MySpace. But yeah, MySpace was launching in Australia. It was one of the first markets they were launching in outside of the US. It was growing exponentially. Like it was nuts. It was sort of out of control. And I was going for this job. She was having coffee with someone that I knew. I chatted to him. She could see that I was going for a job interview. She's like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "I work in PR." She was like, "We're looking for a PR manager." And that was that. And that's when, things really started kind of picking up. And that's when my career really shifted gears. And suddenly, MySpace was fascinating because it ended up doing, like it was almost a a textbook case study of what not to do with a big successful business. They did almost everything wrong. Because at the time they didn't have enough pages to sell ads, because all their ads got just like everything, all their inventory just got sold out, and people just wanted more. It was a young, highly engaged audience that desperately wanted to kind of get a piece of the action. And we had like so many big brands who were falling over themselves, just throwing cash at the business at the time. And it was quite something to behold, like just to be part of that journey was not like anything I'd experienced before. And they were like flying me back and forth to headquarters, which happened to be in LA. I was like dealing with like celebrities. There was like these MySpace secret shows, which are these sort of legendary events where like a few hundred or sometimes less than 100 people could go and see, like an unbelievable act. So, Florence and the Machine, we did a secret show with The Cure at the Sydney Opera House. There were 100 odd people there. Like it was banana.
But 100 people in Sydney Opera House in itself is quite an awe, right? Because it's huge. So
yes, it was one of the rooms. And to be fair on that one, I didn't go because I was like, I don't deserve to be one of these 100 people because I couldn't name you a song by The Cure. So I did bow out of that one. But that was the caliber of talent that we had, and that was the kind of like the influence MySpace had at the time. Behind the scenes, there was another little website bubbling around, which you might have heard of. So Facebook came and basically quietly started pulling people across. it had a far cleaner, neater interface. People wanted it to use it as a utility. They wanted to be able to kind of communicate to their friends without the glittery nonsense that kind of littered MySpace. So I mean, MySpace Australia, I will say, did kind of hold its own well beyond MySpace in other markets. Like we were one of the last markets to kind of close down our offices, but it was 4 or 5 years that I was there, and honestly, it was some of the most fun I've ever had at work. You know, I was given more responsibility than I probably should have been at that age. You know, because again, like I described with the agency in Milton Keynes, like you know, we were defining what social media was to the media. Like it was like, you know, people kind of were doing like Friends Reunited, Bebo was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
MySpace really was the one that, you know, cut through, and everyone heard about it. The challenge for us in Australia was MySpace was owned by News Limited, and Fairfax were the other sort of big publishing house in Australia. And so when you were trying to do PR for a company that is owned by one media company and trying to get coverage in the other, it did create some really interesting sort of challenges. So it was, you know, again, a phenomenal opportunity dealing with celebs again, but also the dark side of the web as well. There were a lot of people who were pretending to be people, they weren't pretending to be kids on the site, and that caused all sorts of issues that had to again be dealt with from a comms perspective, which was, you know, really serious stuff. And again, we were sort of not quite making it up as we went along, but the you know, government's policies, the industry itself was kind of just evolving, so no one really knew what to do or how to kind of cope with this sort of thing. And we can kind of, there is an 11-year bit of my career journey, which, you know, which actually did help define, you know, what happened in some respects, you know, with my career. So I did the MySpace gig, and then, long story short, moved back to the UK. And there was another site that was popping around called LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It was growing. I think it had maybe 80 million, maybe 100 million. It wasn't that many members right at the time. I mean, it's a huge number of members, but relative to,
Mm-hmm.
I think, crossed the billion person mark now. So it's kind of, you know, it's enormous now. But at the time, it was kind of, it wasn't quite a startup, but anyway, I then started working at my LinkedIn in a comms capacity, and then in the last sort of 4 years that I was there, that kind of shifted to brand marketing. So I left there as the international brand marketing director. So I was overseeing all the advertising we were doing outside of the US, which was, you know, like just magic.
Yeah.
But in the midst of that, so me and my brother, we were, how did it come about? So yeah, me and my brother were at my mum's. She lives in Luton. She still lives in Luton. Two of my brothers still live there as well. And we were both going to work. We just happened to be there that weekend. We weren't living there at the time. And we were getting the train from Luton to King's Cross. And we were just having a chat. My brother, who had also not long before started a career in PR, he'd sort of studied English. I mean, he's utterly brilliant at what he does. He's far, far superior. In fact, you should definitely have him on this rather than me. He's excellent. And so, yeah, he was just chatting, but he really had this a bee in his bonnet, and he was like, have you realised that everyone that works in PR is largely a white middle-class woman? And I was like, I guess. And I hadn't really thought about it, if I was completely honest, at the time. I think I was trying very hard to prove myself. And I think I've always tried to kind of prove myself to be the best that I could be, that I hadn't really taken a huge amount of, you know, I hadn't really thought about it, if I'm being honest. But for him, it was...
Which is weird. I have to admit, like, it's surprising that you've sort of been in that career for a while and not really noticed, because I usually take stock when I walk into a room. So maybe that was a testament to how you were welcomed into the industry.
I honestly, you know, I think for a long time I felt very grateful to be in the room. I felt very grateful to be at the table. I felt like I was like woefully underqualified for every job that I got. So I just didn't want to be found out. And so, you know, that was just my mentality. It was all about self-preservation, really. And I think, you know, I was, you know, and I was working with great people, and there are a huge number of brilliant people in the industry. But it wasn't until he sort of said it that it became so painfully obvious that I'd kind of somehow missed this. And he was right. He was absolutely right. And when I thought about all the agencies that we were working with at the time, the agencies that I'd worked with previously, and by the way, nothing against these wonderful, fabulous, terrifically successful, and sort of kind, empathetic women that work in PR. I wouldn't be where I am without these amazing people. But there was a disparity there, like a massive gaping hole in terms of diversity. I mean, there's no other way to put it. There was no people that looked like me. I guess I'd kind of become the anomaly. I was kind of like in a senior role, and so yeah, I was just like, this is slightly nuts. And he said we should do something about it. I was like, all right. And then we kind of brainstormed and we came up with the concept of people like us. And what we wanted to do was, there were definitely a lot of people, and there definitely are still a lot of people doing super important work in this space. And we wanted to kind of supplement that. We wanted to make sure that it was additive and that we weren't just doing the same thing that some of these other brilliant organizations were doing. And so we were like, I'm sick of hearing about, why isn't the industry more diverse? Why isn't the workforce more diverse? What we need to do, because the moment I started sort of digging into it, it became, like I said, painfully obvious that this lived reality that I'd had was actually far removed from what was actually going on. And then the moment you start scratching beneath the surface, it all comes sort of pouring out and in painful detail. And so we were like, we need to do something that feels a little bit different. And so what we landed on were these quarterly events, sort of where we invite 10 speakers, and we opened it up on LinkedIn. Anyone that's interested, put your hand up. You had to be an ethnic minority in order to be selected. That was our only sort of criteria, someone who works. And this was specifically for the Marcoms, creative, journalism, media industries. And the idea was that each of our speakers gets 3 minutes to speak about a campaign that they're proud of, a story they want to tell, a business that they might have started, but something that is of interest to other people, that is loosely hinged around the industry. And we had everything ready. We got this terrific set of speakers. And then the idea was that we would invite agency leaders, hiring managers, media, and all these sort of amazing contacts that I'd made through the years. My brother, also a shameless networker, had also kind of made through the years. And then we kind of just went after everyone. We were like, we're doing this thing. You got to join us for this thing. And everyone was super excited. So we were just about to go live. We partnered with Samsung for our first event. We're like, this is awesome. In their gorgeous flagship store in King's Cross. They're like, this is going to be great. And then COVID happened. Like literally the week before we were due to put on our first ever event, and we're like, oh God, like this is like, because we put a lot of time and effort into it. It was the first one. So like the rest of the world, we adjusted and shifted it to digital. And we were like, let's just see, we've got this amazing partner on board who basically did all the tech for us. And obviously we had Samsung on board already, so that was helpful. And so we shifted gears, and we had hundreds of people that joined us for that first sort of digital people like us experience. And it was really good. Like, it worked. And we were stunned at how much interest there was in it, and the conversation that was kind of happening at the time. We were just like, we're definitely onto something. If this works digitally, it will absolutely work live. And then we proceeded to do more of them sort of digitally over COVID. And then eventually, when the world reopened, we went back to our friends at Samsung. We said, you remember that little event that you were going to put on for us? Would you mind if we kind of pop that on now? And they were brilliant, and they very kindly let us have our first IRL people like us event. And the digital one was brilliant just because you could see the reaction, you could kind of hear the conversation. But there was just Shez, you haven't been to one, but we will get you to people like us. In fact, there's one happening. There's always one happening every quarter, so we would love to get you to our next one. Because there's something in the room that is just kind of palpable. There's this energy that is palpable. There is just so much camaraderie. and there's huge amounts of nerves. So everyone who's speaking up on the stage, you've got like anywhere up to 200, 250 people in that room, like who've been invited. And then you're up on stage and you're doing these sort of mini TED Talks, and that's you putting yourself out there. And the idea was that we want to celebrate the industry. It's just like we want to show everyone in that room what they're missing out on. We want to show people, what people like us are made of, and that's always been the premise of it. It's like we don't need to tell you that you need to hire more people. We're going to show you, everything that you're, that you're not seeing at the moment, that you're not, and it worked. And I'd say 50% of the room is, I think, minority. Of some description, and then the other 50% are white allies who are like unbelievably supportive and incredibly important to kind of driving these shifts. People have been hired, people have got new business, we've and everything in between has happened off the back of those events. And then the 10 speakers always end up becoming quite tight as well, which is really nice. So that expands their networks, and then they're meeting more people. And there's something about just bringing people together in that way. That has kind of just worked. The model worked, and we've been doing that now for 6 years. So it was just events, and then, as I said, sort of like digging. As we started digging a bit around, one of the things that kind of kept coming up is ethnicity pay gap. Like it's a big thing. Like it's a known. Depending on which stat you look at, it's anywhere between like 9 and 15% disparity between people just because of the color of their skin are being paid less. We've had this discussion about gender. It's unacceptable for gender, and it's unacceptable for people from ethnic backgrounds to be paid less. I feel like things have kind of shifted from like we need to do something about getting more diversity in workplaces in our industry to actually we our ambitions are bigger than that, and the ambitions should be bigger than that, because we owe it to the broader community. To kind of help people out. I feel quite fortunate, and I feel quite grateful. I feel quite lucky that I was able to kind of land the roles that I did. But not everyone's that fortunate. So I think if we can collectively come together and drive something that will outlast all of us, that would be a really lovely legacy to be able to leave.
There's a lot to unpack then, and the reason why I say that is because just running up to the pandemic, I felt like there was a slight shift to some conversations around diversity. Maybe not so many, but some conversations about diversity. It was still getting shut down in some rooms, but there was definitely more airtime in some others, or more than normal. But what I did around that period is I joined a number of different networking groups. Of course, we had the pandemic and the rest of it, so you were limited in terms of what it is that you could do. And most of the conversations that I had were people sharing stories about how they had been impacted through some sort of, racial abuse or anything sort of like racially driven in the workplace, or even in their personal life. And I totally get it. And I'm not saying that isn't important. That is of course important. You should definitely get that off your chest, and sharing those stories is it's part of the reason why I set up the podcast. Or the thing that really drives me is exactly what you're doing, what your brother's doing, and that is showcasing the fact that yes, these might be people of color, but there's more to them than that. And maybe you should just give them a chance and listen to what they're working on, listen and hear out the fact that they are super smart people and they know what they're doing and they're working on some great stuff. And if you just give them a minute, you might decide to work with them a little bit more, or you might learn something. And then the evolution of that to actually making a difference, because I've always got this thoughts on when you want to say something, it's the why am I talking, right? So if I'm talking just because I want to say something, just because I want people to hear my voice, great, that's fine. I appreciate it, know that, just be very good at it. But really, there's got to be something that the listener can take away from it, some sort of action item, some sort of message that you're pushing forward. And with your work on trying to reduce that pay gap or remove that pay gap between let's be transparent, so white people and non-white people, you can say minorities or global majorities. It's a great action, right? It's a great step.
Yeah, and I think through my career, and this has been like a super important thing for whatever campaigns I've worked on in my sort of 2+ decades in the industry. Like there has to be a so what. There has to be some meaning in there. Otherwise, it's just noise, and it's just awareness, which is fine if you're a big brand and you want to shift people's perceptions around blah, but you need to be able to, it has to be demonstrable and it has to be meaningful. And that was, that's essentially what's been our driving force for this. It's like, yes, this is important. And we have, I think it's important to say that a lot of the people that have been speaking at our events, a lot of the people who've attended our events have ended up getting jobs. We help a lot of people with their CV. We've done this for years, help them with their CVs, help them with their LinkedIn profile, make introductions. We do that. We've done all of that out of, the sheer love of it. Like it's operates as a not-for-profit. And I should, like that, that we've begged, stealed and stolen and borrowed and dug into our own bank accounts and our own pockets to kind of fund people like us, just because we believe in it. And we've also had a huge amount of generosity. So our campaigns are run by brilliant this awesome creative agency called Worth Your While, who are based in Copenhagen. They're doing some phenomenal stuff. They've bought into what we're doing, and they get what we're doing, and they have produced, I think, some of the best work in the industry with almost completely pro bono. And then there are producers that want to work with us because they buy into the cause. So yeah, hugely proud, absolutely, hugely proud of my brother, who I absolutely have to say is the driving force behind this. He is a force to be reckoned with, and it was his idea, and he leads the charge. I live in Fiji at the moment, and have done for the last couple of years. Our family got an amazing opportunity. I've got 3 kids, to be in this gorgeous part of the world for a short space of time, and so that's meant a lot of the onus is on him in terms of the day-to-day, in terms of the meeting with potential partners, in terms of the events and what have you. I do as much as I can, and I work late into the night. But I think I'm hugely proud of my brother and what he's achieved through this. It wouldn't be where it is without his dedication. It is a pretty dark and depressing era that we find ourselves in, and all those wonderful platitudes and all those wonderful corporate support that we got, during COVID, during Black Lives Matter, after that horrendous murder of George Floyd, as you said, I wouldn't say it's completely dissipated, but the conversation's shifted, and we have to acknowledge that, and we need to kind of work within this new sort of era where it is okay to say the things that it wasn't okay to say not that long ago. People are empowered, they're emboldened to say some really god awful things, and we need to that's our lived reality. So we need to adjust as an organization. I think everyone needs to adjust how they combat that sort of mindset, which has kind of seeped in. It's been sort of it's been there, it's always been there, but then there was this sort of shift that came in where I think people were cautiously sighing with relief that actually things are beginning to change.
Let's move on to the next question.
Yeah,
I'm keen to get your thoughts. You praised your brother, hugely for the idea behind people like us, and of course the drive behind people like us as well. But as a duo, there is something there which is coming up with an idea and doing something about it. I mean, I come up with a lot of ideas. I haven't done a lot about it all, right? And there are loads. I mean, I don't know if you have the same circles that I do, but we'll sit around a cup of tea or whatever, and people say, "Oh, you know what? This would be fantastic." And this will be fantastic might be done by someone else 6 months later. Like, oh, I came up with the idea. Yeah, but there is a difference. You came up with the idea. That person executes it. There is something in there about your execution. What advice would you give to someone who has an idea and is willing to execute against it?
I think test it. Try it, sound it out. We built our own sort of platform because we didn't feel like there was one that kind of really reflected what we felt the need was. I mean, and we did it like with nothing, with a huge amount of enthusiasm, with a large number of contacts in the industry, yes, but like with no actual cold hard cash. So I think if you can come up with a concept and you're excited about it and you feel like it actually this actually does serve a need, then go for it. Like you might, it might not work, but it might, and you're not going to know until you try. And I know that sounds really cliched, but it's cliched because it's true.
So I think the advice is great in terms of basically just test it out, right? So that's
Yeah.
and if there is an easy way to test something out, at a low budget, then why not? The closing tradition on this podcast is you name the episode. So tell me, what would you like to call this episode? And just for the audience's insight, you did sort of say, I think I might have a name, and I said, well, I don't know if you're going to go with that one or not. And by the way, even if you came to the table with Boaty McBoatface, I'll use it. So you go with whatever works for you.
Yeah. So you did preempt that I would need to do this, and so I had been thinking about it. I think I'll stick to what I thought, which was the name I grew into, because I think it does kind of like define my journey. I think the name piece has been quite important. It kind of has been milestones in my professional and personal life, and all of the richness that kind of surrounds it in terms of why you need to adjust your name. The kind of the diversity piece, the inclusion piece, the belonging piece. Like I feel like it kind of does put a neat wrapper around some of the things we've talked about today, even though it is about me, but don't kind of, I guess it is. But yeah, the name I grew into, I think, is what I'd probably call it.
Brilliant. Well, Darain, Darren, great shirt, man. Thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on this episode. I'm sure the audience are going to take a lot away from this, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person and, of course, attending one of your events.
We'd love to have you there. Thank you so much, Shez.